It's Mo. It is December and it is time to do another try chapter. I like to do try chapters every once in a while where I read 4, 5, 3 books, the first chapter of each, to see if I want to continue to read them. Some people do this as like a tag, some people do this to pick their next book, but I've recently been doing it so that I can get rid of books. So I have a TBR that's way too large. I'm on a book acquiring ban, and one of the things that I've been trying to do is go through my shelves and assess some books that maybe I'm not as interested as I once was when I first got them, or that I'm not sure are going to be for me. So this month is Cloak and Dagger Christmas and the Christie's Missing Readathon, and December is always a month that I try to read a lot of mysteries. So I picked out 4 mysteries that I wasn't sure if they were going to be for me, so I could do a try chapter of them, tell you my thoughts, and see if maybe any of these could be put on the unhaul pile. And that way they can work as corresponding books if I do bring in a book per the rules of my book acquiring ban. Unexpected change of scenery. So let's start with the book that I got the longest ago. This is Close Up by Amanda Quick. This I think is like a romantic suspense or romantic mystery. I think this is very like women's fiction style. And I think that Amanda Quick is probably one of those authors who writes like a lot of books, but I've never actually read an Amanda Quick. And this one is like set in the 20s, which is a time period that I like. And I think this is about a female reporter who is on the case of a serial killer, and she meets either a cop or someone who they then have some sort of love affair, but also it's the mystery of the serial killer, and probably she has like a mysterious past, or her love interest does. This one looks like it's going to be like super fast, super easy to read. I think the first chapter is about 10 pages. It's mostly dialogue, large font, large margins, short chapters, so that looks like a fun time. In time-wise, the next book that I picked up, and also the next book that I will be trying for this try chapter, is Visitation Street by Irvy. Pochoda. I've heard of this author before. I believe they write like mystery, thriller, crime type books. The font is much smaller, but still short chapters, large margins, lots of dialogue. The reason that I was super interested in this one is, one, it's a Dennis Lehane book, so it's like a Dennis Lehane imprint. I've never read a Dennis Lehane, but I'm interested in his work, and he's obviously well known as a thriller, suspense, mystery author. But this one is set in Red Hook, New York, so right in Brooklyn, very close to where I used to live and work, and it has a map in the beginning, which is super fun and exciting. I think the first chapter of this is like 17 pages, so we'll be trying that. Next in time, I recently picked up China Mieville's The City and the City. I think this is like a speculative fiction mystery, and I think it's about 2 cities, or cities that live in the same space or at the same time, congruently or together but separate, and I believe it's a mystery with science fiction and speculative elements, but other than that I really don't know anything about it. I have had other China Mieville books that I have not wanted to read. I think there are a few in my basement box books downstairs, but this one, it seemed really interesting. I recently got it for like 50 cents at a Goodwill, but this was one that I got with the idea that I might not like it or want it, so I thought it was a good idea to like put it right in a try a chapter. The last book that I'm going to be trying a chapter of today is exactly the same. I most recently got this at the most recent book sale that I went to, which was in early December, and I actually had no intention of ever picking this book up. It's Notes on an Execution by Danya Kukafka, and I know this is a super beloved booktube darling. I know Books and Lala loves this one. I think Megs with Books loves this one. I think Gabby Reads loves this one. But this was one that I had no intention of picking up because it is about a serial killer. It's not told from the serial killer's perspective though. It's told from 4 women in his life's perspective. And I just didn't really have any interest in it, but because it's been so well received, because I saw it at a book sale, I thought this was a good one to just pick up for, I think the books at that sale are like 25 cents, and put it right directly into a try chapter to see if this is something I might be interested in. And I have to say, when I looked to see how long the first chapter of this one was, I was intrigued. It's pretty short, I think 11 pages, and it is about the serial killer himself. He's on death row waiting for execution, but it's told in second person. person, and I do love a second person novel. So this will be the fourth of the books that I try today, and when I read some of the first chapters of these, I will come back to you. If you've read any of these books and you think I should definitely keep them or definitely get rid of them, let me know in the comments below, or if you just want to see what I think of the first chapter, keep watching. It's been quite a while since I started this try chapter, and it definitely didn't go as planned. That's what happens when you try to make videos around the holiday. But I was able to read the first chapter of all four of these books, and I started with Close Up by Amanda Quick. This is a romantic suspense, romantic mystery / women's fiction, and in the first chapter we meet our main character, who is a crime scene photographer. I thought that she was maybe a journalist, but she's actually a crime scene photographer, and she's done kind of a good turn for some of the other male photographers. This is set in the 1920s or 30s, so she's kind of accepted into their ranks to a certain degree. In the first chapter, we see her coming to a crime of a young starlet, and she is able to get some photos that no one else is able to get, and she sees a possible connection that no one else really sees in the death of this young starlet, who it seems was killed by a serial killer that has been making the rounds in Hollywood at this time. We kind of just learned that our main character is struggling, but this is something that she's pretty passionate about, and she's an artist, a photographer in her free time as well. So we just learn a little bit about her, learn a little bit of the dynamic of the crime scene photographers. That's the first chapter. I was intrigued by this one, but I wanted to see what the other books had to offer. So the next book that I tried a chapter of was Visitation Street by Irvy, Pochoda. I've seen other works of hers around. This one I didn't end up reading the whole first chapter. I read the majority of the first chapter, which follows two young girls, Val and June, as it's summertime in Red Hook, Brooklyn, and they're trying to come up with something to do. They're too young to hang out with like the cool older kids in the projects. They're too old to hang out with the younger kids in the project. They're too young to kind of be out on their own, but they're too old to like sit around and do nothing. So they end up deciding to take out a raft that they recently acquired and go out on the Bay of New York, I guess it is, to cool off and do something a little bit interesting. So I read about that far, and the beginning of this chapter was that Val and June are trying to figure out what to do. You find out what kind of where they are in life, their ages, and also like what they look like, that they're very different, and they've recently become very different, that one of them is very skinny, one of them is very curvy, that the boys are interested in one but not the other, and like how they feel about that, and where they are in that like middle stage of adolescence. Then I skipped to the next chapter because that is about a different character. We meet a different character who's going to work in his family's bodega, and it's going to interconnect somehow with the characters from the first chapter, and then the third chapter is the same way. So it follows a fourth person, a third character kind of point of view, even though these aren't from first person accounts, how that person is probably going to interconnect with Val and June. From the back of the book, we know something tragic happens to the girls and how all these people come together in light of that tragedy. I was not super interested in this one. I am super interested in the location. I like the idea of this mystery. It's definitely starting you off feeling like Val and June are making bad decisions, which I don't love that feeling. So I think that's why I didn't jive with it right away. And I do think that the writing is a little overdone, a little overwrought for my taste, but the setting alone and the potential for the mystery is enough that I'm hesitant to give this one away. Next, I read a chapter of The City in the City by Mieville, and I'm dubious about China Mieville just because of the genre fiction that he writes, because of the sci-fi that he writes. Also, he appears to be Caucasian, but he also always writes vaguely ethnic-y type characters. Now, I don't know, I didn't do any research, so that's just my initial impression, and it could be totally wrong. So definitely feel free to correct me in the comments if I am. I read the first full chapter of this, and this was actually the story that I was most interested in. This follows a kind of hard-nosed noir-style cop coming to a poor housing development to the scene of a crime where essentially drug addicts or crack addicts have discovered a body. The body is positioned very strangely. She is naked. There appear to be many discrepancies with the body and where it's found, and also the way that she was murdered is very distinct. So our main character detective, being kind of a more big city detective, takes the lead on this case, but he employs some more snooty detectives and some detectives that they wouldn't agree on, and you can tell that he toes the line between the like high class or the higher class of detectives and the lower class of detectives. So right off the bat, he was an interesting character. This is set in like a alternate reality where there are weird words for everything. The drugs are called something weird. There's, you know, words for the different like tweakers or drug addicts that are made up and not American or English. And then it's even specifically stated that English is like the second language of a lot of these people, that there's another language going on. So it's hard to tell if this is a off-world sci-fi kind of thing where they're on a different planet, or if they are in a super future time where different forces have taken over our planet and created different languages and different words. And then at the very end of this chapter, he is speaking to one of the detectives, and he looks over and he sees someone that he kind of hails, and then he realizes that that person isn't really there. So no one else can see the person that he sees, and you kind of are left on a cliffhanger at the end of the chapter of who is he seeing, what's going on with that, is that part of this world, is that unique to him alone, and you're also wondering about the crime that was committed. So this was definitely the most intriguing, kept me the most captivated. And then finally, I didn't even read a full chapter of Notes on Execution. I read a little bit of the first chapter, which is called 12 Hours, and it's told in second person, which I do love second person, but it's talking to you as if you were a person on death row. And then I read a little bit of the second chapter, Lavender, 1973, which is going back in time to the person who's on death row, talking about their parents, talking about specifically the person on death row's mother, and right off the bat immediately has a lot of female violence, sexual violence, and a feeling of constant oppression of women. So I did kind of bounce around to see like what the other chapters were, and you're counting down for the person on death row to the time that they're going to be executed, and then you're also hearing from other women like Safi in 1984, etc. So I knew immediately this book is not for me. And if you recall, I didn't think this book was going to be for me. I had told myself I wasn't going to pick up this book if I saw it, but then I did see it and I got a little bit of fear of missing out or envy of people who really enjoyed this book. But I was right. This definitely not for me. This one will be an immediate re-unhaul. I hauled it and now I'm unhauling it all in December. So that leaves me with the three other books. Close Up I definitely was intrigued by it, but now it's been over a week since I read the first chapter and I had to look the chapter back up to remember what happened. So I think we can safely say that I don't need to be reading this one. It didn't grab me. I didn't remember the first chapter a week later. This is going to be an unhaul. Then I want to talk about The City in the City. Although this was the book that grabbed me the most, was the most interesting. I just don't think I can read the fake languages, the made-up words. I don't think I need to learn new words for drugs and slang for detectives and all that stuff. I thought the story was interesting. I might look up a synopsis, but I'm going to be unhauling this one as well. And the book that I was not super interested in is the one that I'm going to end up keeping, which is Visitation Street. I found the location and the premise of this one interesting enough that I want to give it like like a full attempt at trying to read it. It might end up being an unhaul as well, but if I am in the mood for a wordier, overwritten, more literary type of mystery, this might be a good one to pick up. So those were the 4 books, the 4 mysteries that I picked out for this Cloak and Dagger Christmas Try a Chapter video. Let me know if you've read any of the books that I mentioned here. Let me know if you think I'm wrong and I should keep some of them, or if I'm right to let them go. Thanks for joining me today, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!